Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the RV Connects podcast. Today is episode 48, and we have a fantastic location to talk about today in my favorite state, the Sunshine State. We are taking a trip to California, and we are going to talk today about Anza-Borrego State Park. It is a beautiful oasis. We had a great trip there in September, and we can't wait to dive into what it has to offer from an RVer's perspective. If you're new to the show or just recently joined us, welcome. I am Melina, and over here is my handsome husband, Dan.
Hello.
And together we are the RV Canucks, a wily band of Canadian misfits who travel all over North America in our 30-foot travel trailer on a part-time basis. And we are here to show you how far you can go on your vacations from work and take you along for the ride. So let's get started talking about Anza-Borrego State Park. As I said before, it is located in sunny Southern California. It is the largest state park in the Golden State. It is a vast, sprawling natural wonderland that covers over 600,000 acres with the vibrant colors of the desert landscape providing a captivating backdrop for your camping adventure. The park is actually famous for its fascinating geological formations, which we'll talk about in a little while, its rich history, and of course, the stunning spring wildflower blooms that bring a riot of color to the desert floor, and which is something that I would definitely recommend going back for in the springtime, because one of the things we are going to talk about regarding our September trip is the weather. So before we get into Dan's initial impressions of the desert, which I absolutely loved, I would say it's probably in all the trips we've ever taken in our married life, probably in my top 2 for sure. But before we get there, I want to detail the campgrounds available in the park. There are several, but the most popular in the park are Borrego Palm Canyon Campground and Tamarisk Grove Campground, which are both state-run campgrounds within the park. They both offer a range of amenities to make your stay comfortable: restrooms, potable water, picnic tables, fire rings, all of that jazz. And the park also offers a bunch of primitive backcountry boondocking opportunities for adventurous campers, for people who want to take their trailer a little bit off the beaten path or just tent it. So before we get into the specifics of the amenities, the activities, etc., Dan, what were your impressions of the park?
I really liked Borrego Palm Campground. It was nice and cozy. You know, it's not for our Canadian listeners, there's probably not a lot of tree cover, but it was just a really nice feel. You're right up against the mountains. It's almost like you can jump right off into the wilderness right from there. Mm-hmm. And it just had really unique architectural features that you wouldn't find in a Canadian campground. The stones and the picnic shelter covers over your picnic table, stuff like that.
Yeah, there was definitely kind of an Old West vibe about the whole area. I think very wild, very desolate almost. And I mean, you won't find better sunrises and sunsets than the desert. It highlights everything and just really illuminates all of the natural colors. I do want to start off and just be super clear that we weren't actually camping on this trip. We visited the desert specifically to go to Anza-Borrego State Park as part of our 20th anniversary trip. We took a short vacation. So we did fly and then we into San Diego, and then we drove into the desert for this vacation. And then we spent a lot of time in the state park just to get a feel for it, try some of the activities, write down some good campsites that we might want to come back to. So we spent a lot of time actually in the campgrounds itself, checking out all of the amenities.
And that was kind of good because it let us do a lot more exploring while we were there.
Mm-hmm. One of the campgrounds that we went to, which is Borrego Palm Canyon Campground, it's located just a few miles outside of the town, which is Borrego Springs, and it's just at the park's visitor center. So it's a perfect base for exploring. The campground itself has 120 campsites. They've got tent RV sites. There's something for everyone. There is a few full hookup sites available, which include water, sewer, and either 30 or 50 amp electrical. And there's a lot of other sites that were just electrical hookups. And the electrical hookups were more like, they were good sites. They were concrete pads. And like Dan said, really no shade. There were some ones that had sort of like stone gazebo type things, and they were building some new gazebos. But I think those were primarily tent campgrounds that had the actual covers. Everybody else in the trailer side is probably just relying on their awnings.
Well, and the gazebos were really cool because if I recall correctly, I think some of them were built back in the 30s and they're kind of reached the end of their natural lifespan, which it's unfortunate they have to be replaced, but they have to be replaced. So there's kind of two styles there, but it was really cool. Campsites are nice and level, easy to back in, lots of good sight lines. Shouldn't be a problem for anybody.
So the restroom facilities, there was a lot of them actually for the size of the campground. Pretty clean, well maintained, buildings with flush toilets. The showers are all coin operated though. That's one thing I did note when we were there. So, make sure you have, change available, or I'm sure they would change it up at the gatehouse. I didn't see any change machines when we were there.
No, it was pretty quiet anyways, but I don't think you're going to have trouble finding a roll of quarters.
So the operating season is one of the reasons it was quiet. There was nobody manning the gate booth. I don't think we saw anybody camping in that campground. There were certainly people boondocking while we were there, but not in Borrego Palm campground proper. And that is because of the weather. So
listen, if you're from southwestern United States, you're probably going to laugh at us, but like we can make it till about 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning there, and then it gets too hot, and as Canadians we have to hide. So we would get a good early start on the day. We go out, we do some really cool stuff, come back in for lunch, and then maybe early in the evening we'd venture out again into the weather. But it's hot, and this is kind of our second trip through southwestern US, and we feel the heat.
Well, because it's dry, right? Like it's I don't know, it's different. It's different than your humid summer Ontario heat. It's super dry. And I think the days we were there, like it was something around, like it was hitting like 112, 114 degrees even in the couple of days that we were there in the desert. So definitely too hot to go out hiking, like almost dangerous hot. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So yeah, definitely I would say a spring sojourn would probably be your best bet if heading out in that direction. But we were almost the only one at every place we went to, so it was kind of cool too to have no crowds.
Yeah, it was nice and quiet and wasn't a lot of bustling or people getting in your way. That was neat.
So costs for the campgrounds, pretty typical for state park costs. Obviously, it varies on the campground and the type of campsite, the time of year. However, it ranges. Borrego Palm Campground and Tamarisk Grove, which is the other main campground in the park, they range from anywhere between $25 and $50 US per night. Which, if you're going to roll a Canadian conversion onto that, as of today, which is April 2023, roughly about $35 to about $70 Canadian, which is pretty typical to like a provincial park here.
Yeah, even probably a little bit cheaper than a lot of places at a provincial park in Ontario.
So obviously check the website before you go, because these are always subject to change, but for what you're getting, really a really reasonable deal in my opinion.
Yep, definitely.
So boondocking, obviously we didn't boondock, we did stay in a hotel, but there's a ton of boondocking opportunities. I mean, 600,000 acres, it's a massive, massive park. There's a lot of just kind of BLM style camping where you're kind of going to go off and find your own trails and just set up camp. But we did notice all throughout the Desert State Park, you'll just come across random like billboards, kind of, roofed, what do you call it? Information boards, like with the roof on it. And a lot of those would have maps of the area. They would show you you could kind of see the kind of rough roads that you could go down. They would tell you where you could camp, where you couldn't camp in terms of the boondocking. But I would say in terms of where you want to camp, just be aware. It is the desert. Storms will roll in at any time. Wherever you choose to go, everywhere is subject to flash floods, I guess is what I would say. So don't venture so deep that you'll get yourself in trouble or dug in, but a ton of opportunity to boondock for sure. And maybe on that note, we can talk about one of the things that we did while we're there, and then kind of roll into kind of maybe the top 5 choices or the top 5 highlights to see in Anza-Borrego State Park. But one of the things that we did when we're talking about the roads, the backwoods roads, is I really, really wanted to hike the Slot Canyon in the park, which was amazing. A lot of the information that I found prior to going there was that, don't even attempt to head to the Slot Canyon without a 4-wheel drive vehicle. So we did rent a 4-wheel drive SUV, but when we went there, I mean, it was a dry day. There was no chance of rain in the forecast. It certainly was a bumpy road. I would say it's kind of reminiscent of the roads in Moab where we went into the backcountry.
Yeah. Very similar, even backing up to like BLM. The signage was the same, organization was the same. So, yeah, it has the same kind of feel, kind of gravelish road, the road to your cottage. Probably on that day you could have got a minivan up there, but if you're an RVer and you've got a sport utility and a pickup truck, chances are you have four-wheel or all-wheel drive. I think you would have been fine, no problem.
Yeah, I think for sure that road in particularly was flat enough. And I mean, you went up a small kind of hill right up at the end, just towards the parking area. But other than that, I would say for sure, like you could do that in a like Dan said, a minivan or even a two-wheel drive vehicle on
Yeah, I feel
particular
like it
days.
was only like maybe 5-10 minutes off the main highway. It wasn't a big distance.
Yeah, it wasn't big at all. One of the positive points. Now, maybe first we should back up and preface that by saying I do happen to know there's other areas in the park. I know there's some mud caves, there's some wind caves, there's some really neat hoodoos, like really off the beaten path things, and we have looked a lot of them up on YouTube, and those roads are definitely like, you need a Jeep, you need a four-wheel drive. So like
Use your brain.
basically have a look at the satellite map before you go down the roads. But going to the slot canyon, first of all, I would say it's absolutely amazing. And I don't know if that was just the fact that we were literally the only people there and it felt like we were the only people on earth at that particular time. So that part in itself was really, really cool. But when you kind of take this road and you round up around by the parking area, which by the way, you do have to pay to park there. However, they do have an app and there was still service there. You download the app that's specific to the state parks. It's a third-party app, but they book all of the parking spots for the California State Park. So I will put that up on our Instagram so that you can all see what we used. And you just kind of pick the parking lot where you're at and how long you're going to be there and pay your fee, which is probably good that one, people know somebody knows you're there. That way you're kind of registering your existence. And two, I can't remember what it cost, but it was only like $7 or $8 or something to park for
Yeah,
the
it was
whole
pretty
day.
cheap.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a cheapskate. It would have stood out in my head if it was a lot of money.
Yeah. So the other great thing about the parking area for the slot canyons is that there was bathrooms there. And I actually wasn't expecting that. So that was really cool. They were drop toilets, they were clean, but it was nice to have, especially when you're starting and ending that hike. Of note, I would say, because we talked previously about the temperature and how warm it was, let's talk about the signs, the hiking signs. Remember when we pulled up to the trail and there was like the skull and crossbones sign?
Oh, yeah, I have a vague recollection. Like, a skull and crossbones sign's not going to stop me. That's just going to make me want to find out what's on the other side.
Okay, badass. Anyway, the gist of the signs were that basically it is like dangerous to be hiking in this weather. Make sure you bring enough water. This is no joke, right? So we happened to start this hike at like 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning. So it was reasonable. We were going into a slot canyon, so we weren't in direct sun. So we did have a ton of water. We had some salty snacks, all of that great stuff. So I would say it took us about 2 hours to do the slot canyon, but we were going super slow. Like we were just really taking our time. There's a couple of other canyons that kind of branch off there. So if I was going to give somebody tips for the first time doing this, one is that when you enter the canyon, you kind of go over the crest of a hill and a very unmarked trail basically that goes down to the bottom. When you hit the bottom of that trail, go left. We went right, assuming that the canyon we figured the topography as we could see it, the canyon looked like it was to the right and it was not. So we went quite a ways to the right and then turned around and went back to the left. And then that's when we found the actual slot canyons. And I would say if you're going to take any of those tertiary canyon trails, like nothing is marked down there. So make sure you find some way to mark it. I know, Dan, you were marking.
Yeah, like, listen, know where you made a turn. And if you made a turn, it's maybe not a bad idea to, like, draw a line in the dirt with your foot or stack a few rocks up or one good tip you can do a lot, and this goes for walking down any trail, every so often turn around and look behind you, because when you come back down the trail, you will at least have some recollection of what the trail looks like when you're coming back, because it will look completely different going back than it does going there as you're walking down a trail.
Mm-hmm. And I would say the other thing to be aware of is the narrowness of the canyon. It wasn't as narrow as I actually expected that it would be in some points, but definitely there was one spot I think we had to take off the backpack and then shimmy through, but it was like probably 18 inches, 2 feet.
Yeah, it was no problem, and good set of running shoes, backpack with some waters and some snacks, and we poked along. I even ran my GPS watch because, I like to get my steps in. And so I knew how far we went down. And then when we were walking back, I knew we were getting close because, basic math will tell you that if you walk a kilometer out and you need to walk back, it's another kilometer back. And if you've gone 2 kilometers, you've gone too far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would say the slot canyons itself weren't as like colorful as like some of the ones you would see in Utah, Arizona, where they're kind of like that streaky bacon look where they've got all the pink rock. It was more kind of like grayish rocks, but still super, super cool. No noise from anywhere. Like you're nowhere near. I mean, the highway is what it is, but it's like a 2-lane road. Like there was no noise. You just felt like you were the only people on the planet. So it was kind of cool and kind of neat to see it in a time of year that isn't packed with people, which was really cool. So definitely if you're going out that way, that should be like in your top 2 things to do, hands down.
Yeah, for sure.
So other than that, there's a ton of hiking opportunities in the park. One of the other things that I actually wanted to do, but we did not do because of said heat, was the Palm Canyon Trail. So that is in the Borrego Palm Canyon campground, and it's right up near the tent sites where Dan was talking about those kind of 1930s style, really cool stone and wood, veranda style coverage areas. And in that part of the loop is where the start of the trail is. They do warn you about rattlesnakes on the trail, but essentially this trail is a 3-mile loop trail, and kind of at the tip of the loop is essentially a palm tree oasis. It's basically an oasis in the desert. And I really, really wanted to do that, but we only had so many mornings, and at that time of year, you'd have to go early morning. So we didn't, but we did go to the trailhead to have a look around. There's a really great info board with a lot of information on it, calculations of how much water you need when you're hiking, talking about rattlesnakes, all of that kind of stuff. But one of the neat things for us is that when we stopped there was actually a couple of bighorn sheep just wandering through the campground, which there's a ton of them. And Borrego is, of course, Spanish for those bighorn sheep. So it was kind of neat to see one just kind of wandering around, a couple of feet away from where we were.
Yeah, those were cool. Like, I just love seeing that kind of stuff. So the wildlife was cool. The trailhead is like really close to the campground, like probably almost walking distance to the campground. So that's nice and convenient too.
And I would say the one thing that was like a delightful surprise, and probably because we were the only people in the park, was those like roofless toilets, which if you follow us on Instagram and TikTok, you've seen it. I've posted photos and videos of it. But essentially, it's 2 flush toilets, which are in a little stone enclosure with no roof on it. So, I mean, it's nice and sunny. It's warm in there. You can kind of go in and take your time, but I'm not quite sure how it would work if the park was at full capacity.
Well, you went in and checked it out and gave it a go, and I think you liked it. The stonework was amazing. I don't know. It's just really neat and interesting, and there is no worries about your privacy. You can do your business and be private.
Well, that's not necessarily true. There's 2 toilets side by side, and if you're going to the far one, you have to walk past the first one, which doesn't have a door. So if you're ever using those, go to the second toilet. I guess is my tip. So we did visit the visitor center, which was there, and it was closed, but there's actually a really cool trail around the visitor center that had a ton of different signs on the different flora and fauna and plants that were around, as well as the visitor center kind of has a living roof on it. And if you walk up on top of that, there's a info board that tells you what mountain ranges you're looking at. So it was a really cool visitor center. We peeked through the windows, but it seems like a really good educational stop that you could probably spend an hour at, just kind of poking around.
Yep, definitely, for sure.
And speaking of the flora and fauna, one of the top 5 things to do in that area is wildflower viewing. So in the spring months, it's a very popular thing to do between February and April. The desert is just full of wildflowers. So if you are a photographer, it's definitely the time of year to go. It's a photographer's dream. So let's talk maybe about stargazing, because Anza-Borrego State Park and actually Borrego Springs, the town, is a designated dark sky preserve. So what this means is that the ambient light in the city or in the town is limited. You'll see a lot of like the street lights and things have covers on them. So the light is kind of shining down, but it's kind of blocked from going up. All of the lights are very dim at night. And I will tell you, like, we have seen some dark skies. Like, the stars were absolutely incredible. Like, we would just lay there at night and you could see the Milky Way. And I've never seen a display of stars like this in my entire 42 years on the planet.
Yeah, they do a really awesome job of the light pollution and keeping that to a minimum. And then you had a really cool app on your phone that the name eludes me, but we kind of shoot it up and it would tell you what you were looking at. So it was really, really awesome.
Yeah, and one of the great things about, that particular area is you are very near San Diego, which is where, you're going to get a lot of fighter jets and helicopters, and they're doing training. And we experienced that a couple of times, which, in the daytime they would fly by and you would say, wow, that's really cool. But at night they were running some night missions or training, and you could kind of hear them but couldn't see them, especially the helicopters, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, the helicopters are cool. Like, who doesn't like a good helicopter show or an air show? So that was really neat. The whole area is just really, really awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, we tried to find the name of the app we were using. I'm sure everybody here's smart. Like, you can find something on your phone and figure it out.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a ton of them, but I like the one that we have because it specifically will show you the name of all the constellations, but it'll also show you which satellites are in the sky and who they're registered to. So we kind of played that game for a little while.
Yeah, like, listen, I raised the thing about the app, not because you need to find a specific app, but if you're going to do it with kids, or it's kind of neat to sit there and they'll ask a question, oh, what's that star? And then that star is not actually a star, it's something else. And so you can answer some questions and really pique their curiosity and foster that love of science.
Mm-hmm. One thing also that I want to mention too, which we spent a little bit of time going to, and you can do this by car, you can do this by foot, you can kind of pull over at the side of the road and walk, or in and around them, you'll find, little dirt roads that you can navigate with the car. But there's these amazing metal sculptures that are just kind of neat art installations that are throughout the desert. And you'll find everything from like a giant scorpion to almost a full-size elephant to, bucking broncos. Like, it was just a really cool thing to see. And depending on where the light is in the sky makes a really cool photo opportunity. Just, they're entirely rusty. So, make sure your tetanus shots are up to date if you're going to go touch them. But yeah, it was a really cool addition.
They're neat because if you're there for a couple of days, you're going to see a few every single day or driving around. It's not the kind of tour, I'm sure there is a tour where you could see them all, but they're probably best appreciated just by letting them get plugged into your day as you're doing your business.
Yeah. In fact, there's actually over 130 of them. So you could literally make that kind of, like Dan said, do a couple a day. There is maps that you can get at the visitor center in the park as well if you're interested in taking the metal sculpture tour. I guess it was really, really neat. So day trips, there's even opportunities for day trips. And I was actually pretty amazed by this town called Julian, California, which some of you might know. It's actually really famous for its apple pie. There's a ton of apple orchards there. And we took a day trip there. And what a difference even in the geography. Like, they get snow there. It was a lot of like deciduous trees. It was very green compared to the desert. And it was like 45 minutes from Anza-Borrego.
Yeah, it's almost the same feeling we had when we went through Arizona. 1 minute there's all kinds of trees and you blink and now you're back into the desert in a totally different kind of geography.
So ton of stuff to do there as well. We were there on a Friday. It was pretty busy downtown. There's a lot of like great little shops, restaurants, it's like an old mining town. So a lot of old historical architecture, museum, all of that jazz. And it was great to spend, like, you could spend 3 or 4 or 6 hours there, even including the downtown museum. One of the things that we went there for actually was to see an old mine, and it's called the Eagle Mining Company, and it's just right, I don't know, it's like 3 blocks from downtown, basically up the hill.
Oh, for sure. Like less than 5 minutes.
Yeah. And when we pulled up again, it's off season. So I think we were the only people there when we pulled up, and there's just a couple of people milling around who work there. And essentially what it is, a family who has purchased this mine. And I think it was a silver mine back in the day. And this family purchased this mine like 45 years ago, and all of the equipment is there, and they run tours, and super friendly place. It was really enjoyable. Like they started the tour outside and showed us
Yeah, it was
some
really
machines.
informative. You started panning for silver or gold or whatever, and that was cool. And then they had a really good personal touch. But when you got into the mine, it was like you felt like you were in a real mine. They explained how things happened, why things happened. It was really money well spent. And whether you're taking your kids or just a couple adults, I think I would recommend it.
Hmm. So yeah, it was a gold mine, obviously, because I forgot that we panned for gold. And Dan and I had a bit of a competition when we were panning for gold because, like, literally, I'm from the West Coast. I'm from Vancouver, and like the amount of times we would have to go to school trips and like we could pan for gold at like these mines and things. And I was like, yeah, I've got this. And Dan totally blew me away. His panning technique is second to none.
Yep, first time I ever did it too. She's a real gold digger.
Wah, wah, wah. One thing that was cool about this mine, so there's several levels in the mine, but you only get to see two of the levels. I think some of the lower levels they haven't been to in decades, if ever, and I'm sure they're probably flooded out and everything. But what I thought was kind of cool was there's two mines actually that were eventually connected together back in the day. So the two men who owned it on either side of the mountain kind of, formed a bit of a friendship and an alliance and
Partnership.
partnership. Well, it wasn't, yeah, anyway, they formed a bit of an alliance and eventually bore the two mines together so that they ended up being one mine, which was kind of cool. One thing that I loved, and I remember the same thing when I was in the Oregon caves when I was about 10 years old, is that like once you're in the middle, they shut the lights off so that you would see what it was like kind of for spelunkers when they were going in the caves. They actually did this in this tour, which I thought was cool when they talked about, here, this is what you would have seen if you were working here. And he lit kind of one candle that was like in his hat and then shut the rest of the lights off, which was awesome.
Yeah, I forgot about that. That's cool now that you remember it. Yeah, that's neat.
Yeah. So in Julian, like I said, it's famous for apple pie. So there is like 5, 6, 7, 10 places to get apple pie. We chose the aptly named Julian Pie Company, which was delightful. It's in like a small little house on the other side, like the far side of town, and the most delicious pie. And they have like so many different types of pie. We just got classic apple. Dan and I have this standing debate in our house, and we've talked about this on the show before, but I was like so excited to go to Julian because I was like, listen, man, these are like apple pie specialists. Like they know how apple pie is supposed to be served. And Dan is firmly in team cold apple pie. He believes apple pie should be served cold. I think it should always be served warm. So I thought, we will go to Julian, we will just ask for pie, and we will just get it the way they serve it to us. No, like, would you like it heated? Nothing. I'm like, we're just going to see what they put on the plate. And of course, it was heated. And so I say that I win. And forevermore, we know how apple pie is supposed to be served.
Best 2 out of 3.
We also grabbed lunch at a place called Miner's Diner, which I do want to mention because it was actually the coolest restaurant. They have, it's like upstairs, it's almost like a turn of the century / like 50s style diner. Like they have original turn of the last century, I guess, like soda pop machines, and you pick your flavor of soda pop and they will like throw it together and mix the syrups and carbonate it. Really tasty, great home cooking. Our waitress was amazing, super friendly people. In the basement of this restaurant, they have what's called a candy mine, and it's literally like a little candy shop that sells candy, but it's all like done up like a mine shaft. It's very cool. There is a little, what do you call them?
There's like a model train that goes around the edges of the ceiling, sort of.
Yeah, which the owner built, but he's got the model train track, but everything else he's built with like scrap stuff, like to make the bridges and the things. Just really ingenious, great place to stop for lunch. So if you are ever there, the Miner's Diner is the place to go.
Really friendly. Portions are generous. You're not going to go hungry.
For sure. And speaking of generous portions, I want to talk about dinner. So great dining options in Borrego Springs. When we got back one night after hiking, we were very, very hungry. And when the sun went down and it was cool enough, we headed into Borrego Springs to grab some dinner, and we really felt like some Mexican food. So we stopped at a place called Carmelita's, which is in like a strip mall. Again, not a lot of places were open because it was the off season. And when we went into Carmelita's and ordered, I don't know, we were one of like maybe 2 or 3 people in the place, and they had said that they had just opened up that week. This was mid-September, and they normally don't start getting busy again until kind of mid-November. So it was great. We caught them when they were just back, but oh my gosh.
Well, so like you have to understand that Mexican food where we live consists of two Taco Bells, and when like one of them is a brand new Taco Bell. So we don't have a lot of options when it comes to authentic Mexican food. So when we went in, they were very friendly, and we really just asked the waitress to recommend what we should get so we could have a good little taste of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I would recommend if you go there. Like, unless you really know what you're ordering, authentic, like in terms of authentic food, regardless of what the cuisine is, just kind of tell them what kind of things you kind of like and let them put it together for you.
Mm-hmm. And it was delicious, just kind of like uncomplicated, slow cooked, like just like comfort food.
Yeah, the best Mexican food we've ever eaten.
Yeah, I would say for sure. One thing I do want to mention as it relates to RVing specifically is the roads. So as Dan and I mentioned, we flew in to San Diego and we drove to Anza-Borrego State Park. So it's about 2.5 hours-ish from San Diego. I feel like I'm going to take this part to describe the drive, because I will tell you that as soon as we got in the rental car, Dan fell asleep and he didn't wake up until we got to Anza-Borrego State Park. So I was kind of on my own. Beautiful scenery.
I tried. I'd been up like since 2 a.m.
As had I.
My time, whatever time that was, California time.
Yes.
I was not a good husband. I tried.
It's fine. I was happy to let you sleep. And I was like, listen, the drive is gorgeous. I just turned on the tunes and like turned it up just a little bit to drown out the snoring, and hit the road, put my sunglasses on, and it was an awesome drive. But I did find myself really thinking at a lot of parts through the drive, I was kind of, navigating. I mean, it's very mountainous, so I was navigating the roads. They're quite narrow, and I kept looking in the rearview mirror thinking, would I do this with our trailer? Like, could we get through this comfortably with, our truck and our 30-foot trailer, which makes us, like 54 feet probably, driving through? And the road we took was Interstate East. Then we take California 79 north, and then you take that until you hit 78 east. So that is the town, or that's the road that goes through Julian. That's the road that goes through all of these beautiful mountainous areas. But I would be worried. And I mean, there's not many places that we don't take our trailer, but the roads are so narrow that I would be concerned about the length of our truck and our rig together. And I don't know, we took the same route on the way back and Dan was awake. So what were your thoughts?
Yeah, like I think my thought is, and like Melinda said, there aren't many places we won't go. If I was towing, I would not want to take that route with the trailer and the truck. If you have like a Class B RV, you're probably fine, something the size of a FedEx truck. You're fine if you've got a pop-up camper, but when you think about construction and tight turns and everything else, I would not be doing it with a big trailer or an RV.
Yeah. So to be clear though, like I actually did look it up when we got home, because I was interested if there was like length restrictions or whatever. So there is no official length restrictions, but I am just saying, as a seasoned RVer, as somebody who tows, the grades were steep enough and the roads were curvy enough that I would think twice, or I would look for an easier route. And there is an easier route for sure that's less mountainous, and that's to take Interstate 15 north from San Diego, then go to 76 east, 79 south, and 78 east. So by the time you hit 78 east, you're past Julian, and it's basically just straight road from there into the desert. So that route in particular that I just mentioned, there's fewer mountainous sections. So I think if you have a larger rig, you would probably be more comfortable with that alternate route. In terms of rig length within the state park, there's really no restrictions. Borrego Palm Canyon Campground, like most state parks, will take up to, say, like 35 feet in length, but there's a couple of sites that can take up to 45 feet. So if that's something that you're interested in, make sure you get your reservations in early, just like any other RV park, to try to get the site that you need. Tamarisk Grove Campground, which is the other campground that I mentioned, the sites are a little bit smaller. It's more suited for tent camping or small RVs, trailers, etc. So the maximum length at that campground is about 25 feet. Now, what I would say is if you have a massive rig there's enough boondocking spots that are like just off the road where you don't have to go too far, that you could have any length you want.
So the other thing I'll tell you, if you're not into the state park type camping, there's a place called Borrego Springs Resort, which is essentially an RV resort. So I would recommend that if you're really not into the state park kind of camping, or if you're looking for your traditional RV resort hookups, because that's another option if you have a really big rig. The thing to know about this area, Borrego Springs, is that you're never really more than 10 or 15 minutes from anywhere. The RV resort itself can't be more than 10 minutes from the state park and the trailhead to go into the mountains. So you're never too far from everything, and you'll get to experience what you want and stay in some accommodations that suit your lifestyle and what you're camping or glamping in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. So we actually did drive to the RV resort, which, like Dan said, is the Springs at our Borrego RV resort. And it's gated, like we couldn't totally get in, but we saw from a little overlook. It is definitely big rig friendly. I would say it's more of like a premium type RV resort where you're going to get a lot of Class A buses, spa facilities, all of that kind of thing. And I believe there's also a golf course there. So if that's your jam, absolutely hit it. You're not going to be disappointed. It was actually kind of ritzy. It reminded me a little bit of Oasis in the Desert. Is that the one we stayed at in Las Vegas?
Yeah, probably similar to that. Like gated, like, hey, I want to go in there. That kind of feeling.
Yeah, but they wouldn't let us in.
But they wouldn't let us in.
Listen, I think, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, 100% this should be on everybody's bucket list. Like, you will not experience the type of things you experience anywhere else. Like this, the desert is amazing. The sunrises, sunsets, the amenities, the activities, the people. It is like, I cannot wait to take the trailer back there.
Listen, it's a really cool trip. It's a really neat area. I know I missed the drive up the first time. The drive back was really cool the second time. There's a lot of stuff to do. Go up there, bring a book, take it easy, do something cool in the morning if you're doing it in, the hot season, and then take it easy in the afternoon and look at some stars in the evening. Kid friendly, so if you've got kids or grandkids, it's a great spot to bring them, whether they're little kids or teenagers. Really, like, I think the girls would have had an awesome time.
Oh, for sure they would. In the on season, I guess, or the busy season, there's also like a farmer's market that's downtown Borrego Springs, weekly. And yeah, it's an excellent home base to even just branch out and do other things in that area of California.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Okay. All right. Well, that's it for us. And we will be back in a couple of weeks with another episode. Maybe Dan will dive into some RV maintenance stuff.
Yeah, so I've been saving up like some things we need to talk about, people, about RV maintenance. And it's not the stuff that should scare you, but things you should have in the back of your mind. Especially, when you own a trailer for a couple of years, it's fine. But like getting into 3, 4, 5, 7, 10 years, there's things that need to be done. So maybe we'll talk about a few of those things.
Okay, folks, we will see you again next time. And thanks as always for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.